Do you ever look around at your life and think, wait a second, how did I end up here? Not in a bad way necessarily, just in a, interesting kind of way. Like maybe parts of your life feel familiar, maybe predictable, maybe a little too predictable. Same types of situations, same kinds of people, same patterns showing up in new forms. You've thought about making changes. Maybe you've cleared out your space, switched up your routine a little bit, walked away from a few things that didn't feel right. Maybe you've even given yourself a pep talk or two, but somehow, no matter what you do, it feels like you keep ending up in the same place, like you keep circling back, even when you want to move forward. I get it. I've lived that cycle over and over. I did that until something shifted. Quietly, but it shifted completely. It wasn't that I suddenly had more time or more support or more resources. What changed was how I saw myself, and more specifically, what I assumed to be true about what was possible. At some point in my personal growth journey, I came across something called the law of assumption. I didn't grab onto it right away like it was some magic fix, but at the time, the idea made sense. It matched what I was already starting to notice, that I'd been waiting. I'd been waiting for something or someone else to shift things for me. And when I realized no one else was going to do that, something clicked. If no one else was in charge, maybe I was. That realization is what made the law of assumption click for me. But stay with me. This isn't about some magical thinking or pretending you're a millionaire in the mirror every morning. This is about something way more grounded than that. At its core, the law of assumption is this: what you assume to be true becomes the lens through which you live, and that lens affects everything. It affects what you notice, what you act on, what you avoid, and what you even believe is worth trying. Here's how that can show up. Say you assume you're not good with money. You're not announcing it to anyone, but the belief is quietly baked in. So maybe you avoid checking your bank account. You tell yourself you're bad with numbers. You put off learning the basics of investing because it feels overwhelming. Or you overspend when you're anxious and you just call it treating yourself. None of those choices happen in a vacuum. They all spring from the assumption that you're not good with money. Now, let's flip that. What if you assumed you were good with money, or at the very least, fully capable of becoming someone who is? It's the same reality, but a different operating system. Your assumptions act like invisible scripts. They're quiet, but powerful. They're so subtle, you don't always realize they're steering your decisions, but they are. And here's where it gets fascinating. Neuroscience is starting to back this up. Your brain is constantly filtering the world through something called the reticular activating system, a built-in mechanism that decides what information gets through and what gets tuned out based on what it thinks is important to you. And what does it use to figure that out? It uses your assumptions. So if you assume you're too late, your brain will start filtering for proof that you've missed your window. If you assume your ideas don't matter, your brain will help you ignore or downplay the signs that they do. But if you assume you're actually right on time, even if your path looks different than expected, your brain will start pointing out people and timing and ideas that support that. It's not magic, it's just mechanics. And it doesn't take decades to shift, just awareness. For me, this clicked when I finally caught an assumption I've been carrying for years. It wasn't some big dramatic moment. I just realized I had been quietly believing that I didn't have anything of real value to share. Not because someone told me that, No one ever said that to me. But because somewhere along the way, I just kind of absorbed that. And once I saw it, I started noticing all the ways it had shaped my life choices. Not because I had some massive breakthrough, but because I finally heard the thought and realized I'd been repeating it in a dozen different forms for a long, long time. It was about work, about relationships, even hobbies I never gave myself permission to try. So I experimented. What if I assumed my voice was valuable? What would I start doing differently? Would I stop overthinking and start sharing? Would I say the thing, even if it wasn't perfectly polished? Would I move forward before feeling ready? Turns out, yes. Not because I suddenly believed I was amazing, but because I was working from a different starting point. And that's what the law of assumption does. It doesn't erase doubt. It just hands you a new lens. And that new lens is one that isn't built on fear or past disappointments or someone else's story about who you're supposed to be. And the best part, you don't need anyone's permission to do it. You don't need a green light or a gatekeeper. You don't need to wait until you feel sure. You can try on a new assumption, and you can do that today. And just let it quietly inform how you move through your life. Maybe you assume that your voice does matter. Maybe you assume your timing is actually perfect. Maybe you assume what you love doing still has a place in the world, even if the world looks different than it used to. You don't have to fake belief. You just have to assume it's possible and take a step from there. That's the law of assumption. It's not a gimmick. It's not a shortcut. It's just a small, powerful shift in where you begin. And no, it won't always work like magic. But the moment you stop living from assumptions someone else handed you, you start living from your own, which changes everything. Thanks for hanging out. Next chapter is coming soon.